Hey, everybody, welcome back to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. I'm super excited to share with you today's episode you're about to listen to with Isabelle Bart. Three huge takeaways. One, the idea of the relevance of entrepreneurial thinking and entrepreneurship through a university or an academic setting. A lot of people have very strong opinions about whether or not entrepreneurship or the entrepreneurial life taught or learned through an academic university setting. And we unpack that and kind of make a case for both perspectives. Secondarily is just the idea of personal resilience and facing adversity and overcoming it in one's life. We share Isabelle's own story of cancer recovery and personal transformation. And then finally, we leave you all with a couple of really applicable kind of exercises and tips about how you can foster a more entrepreneurial thinker's mentality in your own life as a leader or as an employee, or even inside the organizations that you may lead as an entrepreneur or work at as an employee. So huge, packed with information, packed with value, and just a human positive energy as well that Isabelle brings to every conversation she's a part of. So really lucky to have her today and excited for you to share it. Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, welcome back, or welcome to, and maybe today I should say bienvenue, to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. Remember, this is the show where we talk to the brightest entrepreneurial thinkers from across the world about today's biggest challenges and opportunities. And today, I'm super excited to be joined by Isabelle Bart, whom I had the good fortune to meet a few years ago at an entrepreneurial community event here in Los Angeles, hosted by our friends at the Alliance for SoCal Innovation. So a little shout out to our friends from the Alliance for SoCal Innovation. Isabelle is a dynamic force in the world of entrepreneurship. She blends a rich background in business strategy with a heartfelt commitment to social impact. As the founder of Impact Innovator, she champions the power of innovation to drive positive change. She draws on her extensive experiences as a coach, a speaker, and a leader in the field. But Isabelle's journey is also marked by the resilience in the face of adversity as a human, as a person, as a cancer survivor, which has fueled her passion for helping others to transform challenges into opportunities. She's a recognized leader within the entrepreneurial economies of Orange County and the Southern California region as a whole. And through her steadfast dedication to fostering resilience and pushing boundaries, Isabelle, in my humble opinion, embodies the values of innovation, curiosity, and courage every day. So, Isabelle, I'm super excited to see you. Welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers.
Thank you. What a nice intro. I feel very humble right now.
That's all you. Those words are just describing the work and life that you live. So, kudos to you.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Just came back from a startup conference yesterday, so I'm still very pumped up from that day.
That's awesome. So there's a lot to unpack. You have a really diverse background that covers what I'll just kind of broadly describe as like the entrepreneurship world or the entrepreneurial economy from a university standpoint, kind of the academic end of things. You've worked in the small business development world. So you've got the small business development, small business administration kinds of experiences. And then you've also got just this breadth of experience as a coach, mentor, advisor, executive in your own life as well. Right. So we've got like a bunch of different ways that we can unpack this, but I'm going to start in the most broad way possible, just simply by first asking you, why are you such an entrepreneurial thinker?
Great question. Well, I think I was always an entrepreneurial thinker, but I realized that very late in life. I mean, at a later stage, because when I grew up, as you can probably tell by my accent, I did not grow up in the United States. I grew up in France, and the culture is very different. And I grew up in a family where there was nobody around me that was an entrepreneur. So no relatives, no neighbor. So I probably didn't really know what an entrepreneur or business owner was, when I was young. And I was very fortunate as a good student to follow a path that took me to attend a really good business school. And again, the trajectory at the time was the traditional career was going to join a big multinational company and
Sure.
probably, climb the ladder, hopefully, and one day retire. So I kind of lived in that mindset for a long time. I came to the United States fairly young. I was 22. And of course, my first habit was to replicate that thinking here. So I was really trying to get hired by big international companies, which, in Orange County in Orange County, there are not very, very big corporations. I mean, they
Right.
are
There's a few, but it's not as prominent in the
as other
economy.
parts of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
country, yes. And finally, I got into a medical product company. I thought, okay, that's international, that's big, so I'm probably at the right place. And very fast, I realized that a lot of things were not working for me in what I saw. I mean, long story short, I kind of thought a lot of about the goals for my career, my personal life, and I realized at some point that all this thinking or things I thought I was supposed to do in terms of career and even personal life, I will ask myself whether it's what I really truly wanted.
Yeah.
And I realized again, fairly, in my late 30s, that maybe I didn't have to do like what everybody else was telling me to do or what everybody else was doing, and that it was maybe time to do my own thing. And for sure, you mentioned my cancer journey, and that was, I think, probably the major reason that really made me jump into this entrepreneurial journey, because I was kind of on the edge. But once you build a life and you have a lot of things that you may not want to jeopardize, it's really difficult. But after going through cancer, I thought, you know what? I don't know how much time I have in the future. I can get sick again. Who knows? I can get into an accident. So let me live the life I think I want to live, and where I can have the best impact in the world, especially on other people. And that's what really got me into being an entrepreneurial thinker. And from that moment, everything in all aspects of my life has just been wonderful, because I think being that right mindset for me, once I adopted fully this entrepreneurial mindset, in every aspect of my life, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the right thing for me. And so I started producing amazing things, because I was starting to really think differently. And I
Yeah.
wasn't so afraid of thinking like the norm or what I thought people wanted me to be like.
That's awesome. Wow. There's a ton to unpack there. I'm going to try and pick through some of it and see if we can go a little bit deeper. But just the end there, the kind of the punchline of that story is fascinating, because it reinforces my thesis, right? That the world isn't just binarily made up of just entrepreneurs or investors, or entrepreneurs and non-entrepreneurs, right? And my belief is, and I see it in the younger generations and the way that they are putting together their portfolio of their career, right? And are managing multiple income streams in many cases. And I think eventually everybody winds up being entrepreneurial, right? I think the future of employment, and even in the traditional companies, will be asking of their employees that those employees be more flexible, be maybe even limited different roles. We'll eventually supersede the 40-hour work week construct that you and I started our lives kind of believing that was the only way forward. But I love just how you said it so passionately. Again, the cancer experience, right? That could have been any transformative experience. In your case, it happened to be a health, but you came out of that other side and you kind of said, wait a minute, like this is all I get, right? So should I just be looking for the job with the paycheck and then the retirement, and basically put off all the good things I want to do with my life for another 35 years? And you thought entrepreneurially, even though you didn't necessarily say I have to be an entrepreneur, you thought creatively. I like you say you thought differently about the world that you were in. Did you find that difficult? Because at the time, granted, you had emigrated to the US, but you're still who you are. You're still a born woman from France. Your family is still French. The people in your family who were traditionalists and not entrepreneurial thinkers, like, were still your family, even though they were, thousands of kilometers away. Did you meet with resistance when you started to kind of adopt this more flexible, creative mindset? Were you all alone on an island?
It's a great question, actually, because I have this conversation with some friends who are in similar situations as I am, who are also French. For example, I don't have certain conversations about my job with like my mom. I mean, I love my mom dearly, but right, I mean, when I quit my job, I remember it's like, are you sure about this? Come on, you get a good salary. And I was like, I'm not even discussing this with you, mom. So I have to say, when I go back to my family in France and when I get into that environment, it's difficult at times, because I'm not probably the person you're seeing today or the person you met when we met in person a couple of years ago. And maybe eventually that will change. But because I also think like I've been into such unique experiences that I don't always expect people to understand what I'm going through or what I want to do. But I also, what was also maybe a little bit challenging is I was married at the time. I am, since that's part of my, changes, but I'm got divorced actually around the same time as I had my cancer treatment. But that was, I think, another little challenge is my partner at the time was someone who balanced me out really well and still actually a very, very dear friend today. We get along. I think there was also that difference in how we looked at our life and future and what I wanted to build, which, I evolved so much in my 30s. And I think the way we both evolved was kind of apart, which, it's for couples. And I'm not,
Yep.
by no means I'm doing couple therapy here. But what happened is also, I think my partner was in a much more conservative approach in terms of building a life, a career. And that was also very hard emotionally because that actually was confirmation that I also needed to move away from my marriage. And I think that was the right decision because again, I felt much liberated in a way that, it was now time to build, like be an entrepreneur in building my future life. So not just
Yeah.
career, but also personal life.
Right.
And I never have regretted a minute my decisions because I think when you're at the right place with the right people and this right energy around you, you're unstoppable. And I really want others to experience that because I think there's nothing like that in life where you're feeling like you're at the right place.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and it's a powerful driver on an individual basis, right? When we look in the mirror of our lives, but as you say, and I want to dive on this tangent a little bit. It can be a powerful tool for you, or if it was me or anyone like us, to then utilize to help others to find their path, right? So I want to talk about that. It's obvious in your life story that personal adversity and resilience helped foster kind of an innovative mindset in you. That's obvious. You've already covered that. But you advise, you coach, you mentor tons of entrepreneurs, right? You've worked inside of university systems with young aspiring entrepreneurs, right? You've worked inside of the small business kind of community system here in the United States, and so you get all kinds of entrepreneurs of all different flavors and sizes and shapes. Have you found in your experiences of working or talking to others that this idea that personal adversity and resilience does foster like a certain level of innovation in people or a certain level of entrepreneurial energy?
I have. And this is actually a topic that has me ponder a lot because I think, for example, the culture in France, which is actually very not entrepreneurial in general, I think actually when I meet a lot of French people, I think we have learned, and I'm still not sure how, a way to really cope in the world and be really good problem solvers. And so I think it was part of our education, but I can't quite point to where and how we learned it. Because I think these problem solving skills are really essential to be entrepreneurial and not being afraid of, any challenge that comes up and what are the solutions and kind of jumping to starting to try to solve it and, be more action driven and everything. I don't know if it's a generational thing or a cultural thing, but I think when I work with younger generations, I mean, including my own kids, that's one of my main preoccupation is I think sometimes the education system has tried to simplify their work by wanted kids to, number one, behave well in class, right? Because it makes, I respect teachers and the hard work they do, but it makes their job easier when you have a class of 30 35 kids to kind of be putting an emphasis on let's just have a good group of kids and let's teach
Right.
them which I'm not sure it's again the best learning when you're young. And actually when I meet students at the university, whether they are undergrad or master students, and they ask me my advice, candidly, I said I almost have to tell you that if you want to become a good entrepreneur now, you almost need to first start with unconditioning yourself from a lot of things you learn at.
Right.
Because, and that's probably part of sometimes my challenge with my mom, who was a teacher for
Sure.
a whole career. It's that in the entrepreneurial mindset or entrepreneurial world, there is no right or wrong answer. Everything can be an
Right.
answer. Some things are not. You have to try, right? And in academia and at school, a lot of times, right, the teacher is here to make sure we at least know how to think or find the right answer. But that's not how the actual world functions, right? At least not when
Right.
you're an entrepreneur. So I think there is
Right.
kind of paradox that is sometimes hard to solve.
I mean, it's right. It's such a huge paradox, right? I think that's part of the challenge in and of itself is just the scale of what we're talking about, right? So I mean, we're talking about like institutionalized educational systems, not just in the U.S. but
Mhm.
similarly in France, as you say. And I like we talk in this show in its history, we talk to a lot of folks in Latin America, a lot of the same similar cultural background types of limiting thoughts or cultural expectations, systemically a lot of the same. And yeah, I mean, like in the U.S., like how infrequently anybody talks about or admits to like the historical origin of our little red schoolhouse kind of metaphor, right? I mean, we were like traditional industrialized schooling was a mechanism to do two things basically during the Industrial Revolution. It was to keep the kids busy during non-harvesting, non-farming time, right, and kind of help them progress and get the basics. And then athletics entered the equation of educational system. And why do we have sports and school in the U.S. tied the way it is? Well, because it was the idea we were going to help young men become prepared for military service, right? So that was kind of the premise behind how we organized schooling in kind of modern post-revolution U.S. And here we are in a 2024 world when we're talking about AI and we're living in a much more multicultural, globally diverse country. And yet our educational system's roots are still basically get them in, put them in the classroom, organize the desks the same way, teach the lessons, test the scores, right? And then push them into the next grade level until we hand them off to society at 18 or whatever it might be. And yeah, that's a fascinating way to look at it. I am intrigued. We're going to dive into kind of your perspective at the university level in a minute, but I am fascinated by this revelation that what some here might have called like the old American dream, right? The get a job, marry the right person, do that for 40 years, retire, and then live a good life in retirement right before you die. Apparently, that was also like the French or slash European dream.
I think it was the Industrial Revolution or whatever. I mean, I'm not a historian, but you just explained it, right? The thing is, we're still having these conversations now about what, work. And actually, I really like those topics. I follow some influencers, experts at the future of work and everything, because I find it
Yeah.
fascinating. Because I also think as a student, I got to manage, I think I had challenges like hyperactivity and others that never became too much of a challenge for me. But I've seen in my son, and I see how it's a problem for a lot of children today. And I do think part of it is because the system was never made for certain kind of people. And I think a lot of
Right.
entrepreneurs probably had their struggle in school as well.
Right. No, agreed. And then on the other end of the spectrum, currently, and I am equally fascinated by these topics and this whole kind of genre of where we're at in transition societally. But the other end of the spectrum is we used to have a very robust here in the U.S. at least. We used to have a very robust kind of trades skills educational path, right? And somewhere after I went to college, so somewhere in the 80s ish, we decided to strip that out and just decided that everybody in society should grow up and be a lawyer, a doctor, or later a computer coder, right? A computer engineer. When in fact that's just wildly limiting, and not, as you said, not appropriate for everybody's learning experiences, let alone their own skills or psychological, emotional, makeup. It's fascinating. So you meet these young people. I mean, you're a parent, first of all, so you have a wide view, right? But then you meet these young people and have met over the years at the university level, and I would love to hear more about how they show up, right, from this system. And you're saying like, hey, I think the first thing we're going to have to do is kind of untrain you. Like, so are they showing up and they're kind of seeing what they see on media and they're like, yeah, I want to be the rich, famous entrepreneur? Or are they showing up not to be minimize their value, but let's take the other. Are they showing up with like this wild purposefulness and they really want to change the world and therefore they want to be entrepreneurial, but they don't have any real perspective on what it means?
So it's interesting. I had all these, and above all these above type of cases. I had a recent conversation with, why would you want to be an entrepreneur? Because I want to make a lot of money. And then I had to be my philosopher, old lady who I'm like, they can quite understand it. But I was like, look, all I can tell you is maybe that thought crossed my mind when I was your age, but now I can tell you money does not make you happy. And, but I'm like, hey, how do they understand it? I don't know. And then there is definitely the ones who I think want to do something good too. But the reality is and the students I'm working with are mostly in Southern California, some in some other parts of the world as well. But the fact is today, especially in the US, even if some of them are starting companies at the university or interested in being an entrepreneur, most of them are going to need to go find a job, get hired somewhere. Because unless they can live with their parents and they don't have to make a lot of money, it's extremely difficult. I think that's one of the big challenges in Southern California right now and in other parts of the country is life has become really expensive. So unfortunately, even though when they may have the idea, and start, it's a little bit different. But at the same time, research shows that the most successful entrepreneurs started when they're in their 40s. So there is hope.
Right.
I'm still tracking, okay, like if in my mind, I want to build a startup right now. But the fact is, yes, so a lot of time, and I think being an employee for several years can also really expose them to a lot of different things. So I do still encourage them to say, go find a job, do something. And if you have an idea, keep pursuing that.
Yeah.
But when I started working with students again, because for many years I didn't, and I work with older professionals and vendors, that kind of thing, I also try to teach them without being biased to personality style or, extroversion versus introversion. I think you want to be proactive. You want to be a little bit, curious, and so when I have students in class and I ask questions and, I don't find it very interactive, I try to also tell them, look, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to be proactive. You cannot just sit back and wait and things to happen. So even if you're a little shy, I'll help you get over this if I can. But it's fascinating how, I'm maybe more sensitive now to the personality style of people. If they want to be an entrepreneur, I think they do need to really display that curiosity, that taste for risk. And I'm not sure that most students I've met really show these qualities, at their age.
No, I would agree. That seems to make sense. It kind of jives with a lot of what I saw at the university age level group across Latin America in the last 8 years as I would go out and speak or talk or help run programs at those universities. So the big elephant in the room of entrepreneurship and universities is this nexus between those in the world that say, like, you can't teach entrepreneurship, like that's nonsense. The biggest oxymoron of all time is university entrepreneurship, right? And then there are those that believe that, or some societies, some cultures are a bit more institutional in the way that they expose their societies and their populations to ideas and to opportunities. And so, like I found in Latin America, it's a much more top-down kind of institutional dispersal of entrepreneurialism as a topic, as an idea, right? So we're going to expose the young people to it. We're not necessarily going to create entrepreneurs right out of the gate, but we're going to expose them kind of societally to it from an institutional standpoint. Where in the US, it's very much like, oh, it's Friday. I think I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to become an entrepreneur on Monday. I'm going to borrow some money from my uncle and I'm an entrepreneur, right? Like it's very organic, right? So I'm curious. I really want your take on, you have worked inside the University of California system and in a couple of different campuses. It's renowned as obviously one of the best academic organizations in the world. But I'm really curious, like, what role do you think universities play in fostering entrepreneurship, or we might say entrepreneurial thinking, when a lot of people believe, including a lot of leading entrepreneurs, believe that the only way you can learn entrepreneurship is via practical experience, and to offer it or pursue it inside of a university system is a total waste of time.
Great question. So I think even though a lot of entrepreneurship is a lot about experimentation, failure, doing things, there's still some basic methods and principles that I think are worth learning, right? So some of the things I teach at the University of California is really, if you have an idea or an innovation, how can you figure out if there is a potential path to commercialization? Because the reason why most startups fail almost at 50%, 42% is because there is no market need. And I think that's the biggest mistake I see, right? People come up with a cool gadget, feature, something. Oh, I'm in love with it. But yeah, you're the only one who's in love with it. That's kind of a problem.
Right.
You're not going to sell it. So I think there is a place to teach some of those principles. That being said, I also believe that when you want to do anything successfully, you have to walk the talk and be a role model yourself, right? So, people who have children like me, right? It's like, I try, if I tell my kids, be healthy, don't eat that, don't smoke, don't I display that. I don't, I'm not going to do the opposite of what I try to show and teach my kids. And I think that's the challenge for universities today, which is they want to promote entrepreneurship, but the way they function is the opposite of entrepreneurship.
Right.
So I don't know that at an energy level, it can work really well because, and I've seen people do it successfully when they are given enough autonomy within the university to do it, so it can work. But okay. I think it's like some big companies do that for their entrepreneurship initiative. They create almost separate entities to let these entities be innovative, nimble, and and I think that model can work for your university. As long as the staff, I think everybody in that structure around entrepreneurship needs to have that mindset. Because if everything that you're trying to get done to help your students learn entrepreneurship is pulling hair and and the biggest bureaucracy, like, it would be too frustrating. To me, it wouldn't be a good model.
Sure.
So I have been torn. Sometimes I've asked myself the question, is the university a place for entrepreneurship? I think it can be. But it has to operate completely different if we want to do that well. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. Now, in terms of, so the university also has a role to potentially commercialize amazing innovation from their labs. And that's what I do.
Right.
And whether it's in healthcare, as a cancer survivor, I see amazing potential cure for many diseases. I see at a very early stage. And I feel like part of my mission in the world is like, how do we make this happen and be in the hands of people? Unfortunately, that's another area where, everything that's related to tech transfer and getting to commercialization, I think a lot of universities can do it better by bringing people like me. I mean, I'm not here to sell myself, but who have that entrepreneurial mindset and the business skills and the drive to make it happen, and thinking that that's sometimes the best way to get this innovation off the ground versus trying to turn their researchers, their faculty into CEOs, or which I think doesn't work very well either. But to get them to think that way, sometimes it's difficult. That's been one of my biggest probably obstacle that I've experienced in what I do.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. But also, I mean, you've shined a light on the path forward, right? And as you say, universities, institutions in general are constantly evolving. But if we were to put a marker in the ground and say, okay, up to this moment in history and then going forward, like, they're going to have to continually evolve to remain not just relevant, right, but to remain highly valuable to the communities that they want to attract. Just like any other institution or business has to evolve its value proposition to its community of users or customers or whoever. So it's fast. I love that. Thank you, because you kind of you tackled both big parts of that, and there's a whole separate show we could have about just how to innovate more entrepreneurial and integrate more entrepreneurial thinking into universities and how universities function. But that's a whole other conversation for another day that I really aspire to have, actually. And like, now I know you're someone that would be a great voice in that, because as I even lay out the original thesis of this version of the show, right? It's this idea that I believe society as a whole, no matter where it is on the planet, needs more entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of, right? So we need more entrepreneurial thinkers in education, in healthcare, in medicine, in as lawyers, as artists, as librarians, as transportation department people, like politicians, government. We need more entrepreneurial thinkers across all that. And it doesn't always mean the shortcut way, right? Which is, oh, let's have our next university president be a former entrepreneur or a successful business person. I'm like, oh, no. Like, I'm talking about, like, let's help people who aspire to have a career in academics, which is an admirable life. Like, let's have them understand how to unlock their own entrepreneurial thinking about how the systems that they create or operate inside of could be more useful to society. So thanks for unpacking that a little bit. You coach, you're a leadership, you do a lot of leadership work, a lot of coaching. I want to give you ample time to tell us about that, but I want to open it with a question about this. So you also have a beautiful sensitivity to impact, right? And commonly kind of referred to as like social impact, but impact in your work. So let's open with this question. In your view, what are a couple of key elements of a successful social enterprise, right? And then how would you encourage or teach entrepreneurial thinkers, either as entrepreneurs or, as you say, entrepreneurs, how to integrate those key principles of impact and social enterprise, how to integrate those into their business models, right? So are there a couple of basics that people need to be aware of when they're heading this way?
Yes, and I'm still today surprised that a lot of people, whether they are young, more advanced in their career, may not know the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal framework, right? So for the listeners, if they don't know it, Google quickly UN SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. They are 17. Yep. So this is a very renowned framework around the world. The bad news is, there were 2030 goals, which not many are on track to be achieved. The goals, met by 2030, but the idea is, so first of all, if you have an impact company or startup, I always tell the founders, you still need to run a solid business, right? So number one is you need a good business, because if there is no business, your impact, forget it. There will be no
right.
So that's why I think they go, in parallel. But I also think that a lot of founders can do a better job at building the story around impact. So it's not only about, hey, I'm doing something good, because I truly believe in the abundant mindset of we can have great profits, great companies, great businesses, and do something good at the same time. But we need to build, a simple impact story, which can be, look, the way I propose to build my company is, I'm solving a problem that may be aligned with one or more of the sustainable development goals, or, I propose to hire, part of my workforce being, disadvantaged, or my supply chain needs to be a certain level of environmental friendly, however it is you want to do, you just need to build a simple story around it. And sometimes I use tools like impact logic models, or very, very simplified, but to say, if my company does well and grows, that's the kind of impact I'm going to create in the world. And many founders who I know have this in mind cannot articulate it very simply. So that's the kind of work I like to do with them. Just say, look, we can make it simple, but if you're trying to convince an investor or to get a grant or whatever, then the person is clear giving you money, how also you're driving impact. So we can do this in a simple manner. And I've spoken, I incorporate that in my entrepreneurship class at UCI as well. I do one session just on impact.
That makes sense. And you talk a lot about in your work, I've read in some of your posts and some different things, this triple bottom line, profit, people, and planet. Maybe on the heels of that prior answer, can you give us a couple of examples of like some successful companies or businesses? And they don't have to necessarily be brand names that we would all know, but just give us one or two stories about successful companies that are managing to execute on that triple bottom line approach to their business.
Yeah, so for example, one that I was my first mentee when I started volunteering at the university incubator is a company called Cardena. they kind of changed the car donation process. So they are a public benefit
Uh-huh.
corporation, which is, a for-profit with a purpose, which is a
Yep.
legal entity you can have in California and some other states. And instead of, their competitors who actually made a lot of money over the years on the back of charities and people donating their cars, they reinvented that model. Now, when you donate a car, about 60% of the net goes to the charity of your choice. And so that's an example of a model that I sometimes list in my class, and founder sometimes gets to come pitch to my students
Nice.
of how you can do that. Another example, a very famous example, and I don't know the company so well, but everybody knows the brand, is Chobani, right? Where the model of
Okay.
employee, how employees have gotten more involvement, shares and things in the companies. Other homeboy was also a pioneer in hiring formerly incarcerated individuals. So like I said, there are a
Yep.
lot of different ways you can create that impact. But for me, right, when people ask me what's a social enterprise or an impact company, I said, the good you're doing must be as important for you as making money. But both have to be
Yeah.
really important because you still need to make money and scale.
So that was I was going to ask you, and maybe in the case of the company that you mentored early on, like why do you think they have succeeded where others struggle?
I think they have succeeded because they were really playing in a unique space. I mean, it's not, humongous market either, but they did a great job at storytelling and showing, how it's a much better model, and also enrolling the charities in being directly involved also in
Okay.
buying, wanted to have that model. So there are a lot of different, success factors. But that's the other, I think, big myth out there, because I like working a little bit both in nonprofit and for profit, for the reason that a lot of time people who want to do well, and I see that with students, come and tell me, I'm going to do a nonprofit. But that does not have to be the answer. Actually, most of the time, I will encourage them to not do a nonprofit, but instead looking at a for profit, for purpose entity, which is again doing business for good. And I think kind of changing their mind around and using business tools, because that's the other key,
Right.
building it like a business where you can have a solid foundation, a great scalability and sustainability financially, and then the impact is just going to be like growing as you grow. And that is really the beauty of the model.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love the simplicity of, I mean, it's complex and hard to execute, but the simplicity of the way you explain it, you're obviously a good teacher, right? Is there's two basic principles, right? Like you've got to run a good business and then you've got to be a great storyteller. I mean, and that's so just universally true, right? In life and in our careers as well as in business. But I love the lens of applying that to whether you say nonprofit, B Corp, or even just your own traditional quote unquote business, right? Fundamentally, you've got to have that, and then if you have that, and you have, I would almost maybe say the way I heard your lesson there, the third thing, which is that the value for the purpose, the cause, is as highly valued as the profit, right, or as the revenue stream, then you're giving, if you could do those three things together, it sounds like you're giving yourself a chance to be special, to have a more sustainable path to success. That's fascinating. We've touched on universities, and I have a question I want to ask you about your work in the Small Business Development Center network here in the U.S. But before we do that, let's just give you a chance to just do a little commercial about your work, right? So you work inside of universities. You mentioned UC
Yeah.
Irvine, but you also do outside work outside of the university. You coach, mentor, advise. So,
Because it's a perfect segue from you saying you have to sell yourself.
all right.
In life, a lot of it is about selling yourself, and it took me years to really be good at or better at it. And especially, I think being a woman, I had imposter syndrome for many, many years. But
So tell us about your consulting advisory work, and tell us like who you're working with and what types of companies you can provide value to.
so a lot of the work I've done and I'm doing is still with early stage startups, but I do not usually get paid directly by the startups because they don't have funding, and I'm helping them raise money. So that's why I work through different entities, and I love that work. However, I also sell my services to companies that are further down. So it can be, Series A or beyond. So coming in as a fractional part of the team or an advisor, I'm doing that. I also work with a lot of foreign companies wanting to come to the United States and helping them understand how to look at the market, connect them to my network, which I have a lot of valuable individuals, very good experts in many domains in my network. And finally, I'm actually now got certified, and I'm a coach with a method called Squircle, which is what I truly believe in, is based on using more of your intuition for decision making, whether it's in business or in other parts of your life. And so I'm also branching out to work with individuals who either are entrepreneurs and want to be even more innovative, or feel like they've been a little burnt out, use a lot of their resilience, but still need to drive more innovation, more creative thinking. But also individuals who were in my, like, where I was 5 years ago, which is in a more traditional career, maybe in a corporate environment, and know that they can take another 5 or 10 years of that, and they have a different type of life they want to build, but they don't know where to start. So I usually start with that method because it starts with an assessment. A lot of the preliminary work I like to do is around self-awareness for individuals. So everyone comes with a different level of self-awareness. So some of my clients have a lot of it, and so we get started further down the journey. But for some who are really stuck and lost, and we start really at the foundation and understand their needs, who they are, their strengths. And then I love bringing creative ideas and options and thinking about how they can achieve what they truly desire, which I think can be achieved with the right mindset. So I actually, that's what I'm focusing a little bit more right now, is working with individuals who really want to create deep transformation and start changing a lot of things in their lives.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that. That's great. There's zero reason to feel any imposter syndrome about any of that, because you are a uniquely qualified, experienced person based on everything we've talked about already. So it's exciting to share. I have one quick question, and it's just, this is a very U.S. specific question. You at a point in your career, you worked inside of or worked alongside the Small Business Development Center network. I'm just curious, this is more of like a, what's your opinion on that whole network and the SBA, Small Business Administration programming in the United States right now? When I was coming up as an entrepreneur organically, before there were all these programs and resources and people being taught about how to be entrepreneurs 30 years ago, the SBA programs, Small Business Administration, or SBDC, Small Business Development Center programs around the US, were kind of the go-to place. Like that was where you went to get information or resources. It could just be because I'm old now, but it seems like that is not necessarily the case as much anymore. I hear stories from people, in my friends in government, who are like, we literally have billions of dollars to deploy into the communities, and communities of color, and women entrepreneurship, and urban entrepreneurship. But then I don't ever hear of any entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial influencers or teachers engaging with that. So is the system still as robust and useful and valuable as ever, or maybe I'm just out of the loop?
No, it is still. And the SBDC is structured in regions. So actually, I am a consultant for SBDC in the Orange County Inland Empire region, and the team is fantastic. I mean, I'm just amazed by the consultants that are working in this center. So I belong to the UC Riverside Center, which is one of the 2 tech centers. So that's why through SBDC, I work with clients that are scalable tech or medical startups usually. But I've actually been a client with my own small business of the traditional SBDC center.
Okay.
I think it's a hidden secret, unfortunately, for most people. I try to get the word out. I have a lot of friends who are starting businesses, and I tell them to go to SBDC because all the resources are funded by SBA and actually the state of California. It's amazing. The consultants are really like such experts, and we can co-consult. I can refer to other consultants who have very specific expertise. It's a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, not enough people know about it. And,
right. I mean, the fact that you've said the word hidden and that no one knows about it twice now, that's maybe where I got stuck with that as well. Is just, so it's still just as robust and vibrant as ever. It's just poorly marketed, basically.
And they try. We have great marketing team. I mean, they do good work, but it's just,
Yeah.
there's a lot of resources out there. There's also some other organizations who are, membership organizations or even volunteer networks. But that's part of what I'm passionate about. Is if anyone calls me, emails me, sends me a LinkedIn, and you ask me for my thoughts, I will be more than happy to give some ideas on what resources you can access, especially
That's
free
awesome.
resources. So I think, people should take advantage of these great resources. And then, again, there's a place, later on for other type of expertise needed maybe, but SBDC is a great place to start. And I just, probably referred people, like, 5 people this week to SBDC again.
Okay, that's terrific. No, that's great to hear. Thank you for setting me straight. And frankly, that's why I asked the question, because I wasn't sure. And I historically believed it had potential when it was, and it was really useful when I was aware of it, but it just seems not as common on the minds of entrepreneurs or advisors in most communities that I pass through. So it's great to hear that it's still just as vibrant. We just got to get the word out more. So hopefully we'll help that, and we will put that in the show links as well, so people can track down and find those centers. Last question for you. So if you could, let's try and come up with 2 or 3 practical strategies or exercises that entrepreneurial thinkers can implement to foster a more innovative mindset. And to your point, because of the coaching work you do, maybe it's their own mindset individually as the entrepreneur, or maybe it's the mindsets of their teams or their organizations where they work. Mm-hmm. So 2 or 3 practical strategies that folks can take away and try and explore and apply in the coming weeks.
So one exercise that I've actually mentioned in talks and everything, it's that I think is about curiosity and is about wiring your brain a little bit differently, and it doesn't have to be complicated. So if you have a hobby, whether it's running, walking, biking, going to the beach to read or whatever, just this coming week, try a new place. Or if you like to go out to dinner, go to a restaurant you've never been to, or drive to a different town to just one afternoon to do something else, and commit to it. So, write it down which day you want to do something like that you've never done before. And I think it's a great micro step because, again, research shows that the more diverse experiences we have, the better we are at problem solving and strategic thinking for problems that are complex in nature. So that's one thing I love to tell people to do. Hey, do something you've never done before in the next week.
Yeah, and everybody can try that.
Yeah,
so that's
exactly.
Awesome. That's
so
terrific.
It doesn't have to be complicated. It's how you don't need money, you don't need anything, right? So that's one thing. And then I think part of that is also find time for yourself. So again, I mean, whether you like to move, if it feels good to move, or again, you like to read or go to see a movie, but also maybe try to commit to something. We're all super busy, but I believe, again, that the more balanced we are and when we slow down and give time to ourselves is when the best innovative ideas come. So, the shower,
I would agree.
Stay an hour in the shower if you want, or in your bath. It sounds maybe obvious, but I think especially parents and, busy professionals forget that. And even if it's just sit at a park for a little bit, listen to music or a podcast or whatever, just try that, because I think it's another habit that if you start, on a regular basis, you may see quick results in how you think and how ideas can come to your mind. So those are a couple of things that come right away.
Those are terrific.
To my brain. Yeah.
Those are terrific. Thank you so much. I was listening and I'm kind of excited. I'm a good student because I try and walk 4 or 5 miles per day. But then the other thing that I do, and I didn't realize that I was following your advice beforehand proactively, is probably twice a week, I will very intentionally turn down a street that I've never turned down before. Mm-hmm. And I started doing that this past summer as an exercise to intentionally force myself to discover new things and to also force myself to think. And all of a sudden, everything, it's like Technicolor. right? Everything looks new. It looks different. You notice the front door on that house. You hear the dog barking. You've never seen that. You smell flowers differently. You see the palm trees differently. The street exits on another street. You're like, oh, I didn't even know that street exited here. That's awesome, right? Oh, and there's a cute coffee shop over there. So I can attest, I'll validate that that is a great exercise that people should give a try, no matter what you're doing in your life on a regular basis. But Isabelle, from a random friendship interaction at a conference a couple of years ago where we were talking about all the big issues in Southern California and how to grow the entrepreneurial economy as a group of 75 or 100 of us. It's been a joy to fast forward to today and having stayed in touch via social media and watched you do your thing. It's been a joy to have you on the show and just have you help us to explore kind of this broad thesis of entrepreneurial thinking. So thank you so much for your busy woman, mom, teacher, mentor, advisor, coach, conference attendee. So thank you for slicing out an hour to spend with us to explore topics that you and I are both really passionate about.
No, thank you for helping me share my thoughts. And it was really, I hope a lot of folks will feel inspired.
No, I'm sure they will. I have no question about that. How can we find you or connect with you on social media or an email or a website or wherever you'd like?
My website is impactinnovator.co. You can book a time with me even. So I'll be happy to,
awesome.
If people want to hear things. And then my LinkedIn is where I'm most active on social media, but I also have an Instagram, Impact Innovator. My LinkedIn is Isabelle Bart, like my name. And feel free to reach out through either the website or LinkedIn, and happy to connect with anyone.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. You know, we can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.